All right, so welcome to tonight's virtual event featuring the Niven family wine estates. My name is Shannon. I'm a part of the New Hampshire Liquor and Wine Outlet social team. We have a very special event for you tonight as part of our 90 Days Around the World promotion. We've taken you all over the world to various different wineries and distilleries, and we've met some of the industry's biggest brand names. But tonight we find ourselves in San Luis Obispo, California with John Niven. So I'm joined by two experts tonight. Like I said, we've got John Niven. He is the grandson of Edna Valley founder Jack Niven. We also have Chad Gibson from our New Hampshire Liquor and Wine Outlets Wines marketing team. So John's going to be presenting a really exciting program with us tonight. I'm going to be here to share any questions with him that you may have. So please be sure to leave those in the comment section on the Zoom chat, or if you're joining us on Facebook there as well. Chad's here to answer any questions that you may have regarding inventory or availability in all of our New Hampshire Liquor and Wine outlets. So please leave your questions for him as well. For those of you that have pre-registered tonight, we will be giving away 3 $100 gift cards to the New Hampshire Liquor and Wine outlets. So definitely pays off to pre-register for these events. We're going to be asking 3 trivia questions throughout the night. So be sure you're listening really closely to tonight's presentation for the chance to win. Winners are going to be contacted via email. So make sure you take a look for that in your inboxes once we announce the winners at the end of the night. So with that, I will pass it off to you, John, to get started. What can you tell us about your family wine estates?
Well, thank you, Shannon and Chad and the whole team. It is a pleasure to be here. I still got sunlight in my neck of the woods. I'd imagine you guys are, the sun is just about setting. Is it set? You guys are far enough north.
Yeah,
It's got to be pretty dark.
Pretty dark out now.
Yeah. Well, today I'm here to share with you the wonderful story and insight into the Edna Valley and Paso Robles, which is our neck of the woods here in California's Central Coast. You know, we're just about halfway between San Francisco and Los Angeles, right smack on the coast. And, the Central Coast has been around for a long, long time, but I just love the momentum we are getting down here with, being a great alternative to the great wines of Napa and Sonomas. But, before we jump into the wines, just want to share, a little history and background. We go way, way back here to my grandfather, Jack Niven. He was really the man that pioneered the Edna Valley back in 1973. And prior to that, if you do a full rewind, our family used to be in the grocery store business, really going back to the 1920s with a chain of grocery stores in California called Purity Grocery, which back then were kind of the more mom and pop size, call it the Trader Joe's size stores. And then as the landscape of that industry started to change into the late 60s, my grandfather, and then my father was working with him, had a big, they had to figure out what to do. Did they want to grow these bigger stores and compete with the now big boys that were coming in, or did they want to retool everything? And my grandfather chose to sell off each individual store. At that point, it's about 185 stores from the Oregon border all the way down to San Luis Obispo. They're actually headquartered in San Francisco. And he could have lived a nice, pretty chill, relaxing life, but he wanted to look at growing grapes. So mind you, this is now the late 60s. So in the summer of love, the summer of 1969, he hired Professor Winkler from Davis and Professor Petrucci from Fresno State. Those are the two gods of higher education for kind of California viticulture. But he hired them independently, not knowing that they're hired to do the exact same thing. And that was to go up and down the Central Coast south of San Francisco and identify new regions to plant grapes. And to make a long story short, they both pulled him aside and said, hey, there's this little valley outside of San Luis Obispo. It could be something really special. So mind you, they were hired to do the same thing, and they both recommended this. They were hired to do the same thing, but didn't know it, but they both recommended this little valley of the Edna Valley. So you see in the background of my photo, that's pretty much the Edna Valley looking due west. It is a dynamite place to grow grapes. And, as we fast forward with this history, he planted 13 varietals It was kind of a shotgun approach. And today we're only growing 3 of those varietals, which would be Sauvignon Blanc, Pinot Noir, and Chardonnay, but we're still growing about 11 to 12 varietals, depending how you're counting. So there's been a lot of change with time, but he really kind of did the heavy lifting to put Edna Valley on the map in the early days. He, 1982, he wrote the application for it to become an official AVA, which is a specialized, viticultural area. So there's a lot of history going on, but these wines have new history and old history. There's a lot of good stuff, but before we get into the wines, I just kind of want to share some photos with you guys so you could see what the Edna Valley looks like. So this is a shot from our tasting room looking due west. This was actually a pretty cool shot. It was on the cover of Wine Enthusiast magazine a couple years ago. And for their issue, they did the top 10 wine regions for tastings. But this is a portfolio we're going to taste tonight. So we got our 3 tangent wines of Alberino, Sauvignon Blanc, and Pinot Gris, the Blanc Chardonnay, the Trumith Chardonnay, and the Trumith Cab. But before we get into the wines, just kind of want to give you guys a little overview of where we are here. So this is about 3/4 of the state of California. You see San Francisco up here where my mouse is, LA all the way down in the bottom, and this arrow hits the Central Coast. Beyond the history that kind of my grandfather brought to the region, there's some pretty cool history going back to the Spanish missionaries. So San Luis Obispo was founded as one of the 13 California missions in 1772. And of course, the Spanish priests and missionaries, they love their wine, so they planted grapes here. And it turned out that at this Mission de Tolosa, we were making the best mission wine out of the entire mission system, so much that Russian fur trappers were coming down from Alaska, and people seeking out gold were coming out from Central America just to trade to get the wine out of here. So some pretty cool history. But if you look at it, like I said, we're just about halfway in between. After the missions went away, a famous Frenchman planted some vines and actually grafted over onto some of the French varietals on the mission rootstocks, which were some of the first kind of call it hybrid graftings out there. But really things started getting going in 1973. And if you see our region is not big, and it's just now because some vineyards have been taken out, a little shy of 2,500 acres. But we're home to about 20 great, fabulous wineries, and we love what we're doing here. So let's kind of take you through a little visual tour of the Edna Valley. We are looking pretty much due south here, and you could see the valley floor. This is the last of the volcanic peaks that kind of litter the region. But I love showing this because it really shows how close we are to the ocean. You could see my mouse here. Those are old sand dunes there. And for those of you that are movie fans, those are the sand dunes where they shot Pirates of the Caribbean 3, where Jack Sparrow was tripping out in his boat, got lifted up by all the crabs, and they kind of went up and over the dunes and threw them into the water. That was all. They were out there for about a month shooting that. But that's a good shot looking due south of the Edna Valley. This is our estate vineyard here. I've already talked about my grandfather, but this is a photo behind me, but I love showing it because now we are looking northwest, and this is where the valley opens up directly to the ocean. So the Pacific Ocean really dictates what we do here. What's going on in the Edna Valley is known as cool climate viticulture. We are not a warm region. We are just about as cold as it gets to grow grapes in California. So it's a totally different dynamic. That's why we're enabled to grow beautiful Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, Sauvignon Blanc, and some of these aromatic white wines. But this is a rare transverse valley. Most wine regions in California have a mountain range or multiple mountain ranges between the ocean and themselves. We open up directly. So you look here, that's ocean just kind of out in that wide area. And so I kind of like these two photos. We are now looking the dead opposite of what we just were. So there we are looking towards ocean. And here we are now looking southeast from the ocean. So if anyone's been to Moro Bay, throw in the chat. If I'd love to see how many people have been to San Luis Obispo or Moro Bay or San Simeon, some of the better known places to kind of travel and see about. But This is Moro Bay. So that's the Moro Rock. And the valley as you run in. So if you see my mouse heading this way, there's these old volcanic peaks. There's 7 or 9 of them, depending which local you're talking to, but they kind of come in and, right off this Moro Rock here that gets deep real quick. So that even though we're right on the Pacific Ocean, it is a deep Pacific Ocean, and that's a large, large, cool mass of cold, cold water. And that's what gives us all the fog and wind that just funnels directly into this valley and gives us this long, long, cool growing season. So this is just another kind of aerial look. We were just hanging out here in Moro Bay. That aerial photo behind me is taken just about right here. But we kind of get ocean influence 3 different ways. The primary influence comes in from Moro Bay. You could see the wind pumps in there, then the fog comes after that. But we also overnight will get fog coming in from Pismo Beach and wrapping around. If any of you have had wines from the Rio Grande Valley, like Letitia or Tally, it will the fog will wrap around and kind of come in behind us. So very dynamic when you're talking about cool climate viticulture. And to give you an idea from this little photo here, which is our tasting room, to the ocean, that's only about 5 miles. So we are real, real close to the ocean. So when I just pointed that 5 miles, here we are in Avila Beach. And the cool thing about the Edna Valley, it is the single coolest growing region in all of California. So just kind of stop and think about that. You're talking a very vast state, and our little sliver of viticultural paradise has been proven to be the coolest spot. That was actually done by a study at Southern Oregon University, where their 2 top climate professors took data going back 10 years, pumped it into 4 different algorithms, and in all 4, guess what? The Edna Valley came out as the coolest. But you got to remember, we're in California, so our cool isn't what your cool is. In fact, I was sitting right there on Christmas Day, and it was about 75 degrees, hanging out with my family. So we get enough chill here to put the vines into dormancy. But we are also far enough south that the vines wake up a little earlier, and it kind of gives us this long growing season. Typically, our vines will wake up and you'll get bud break in, say, February, but then that cool summers that we get with all that fog and wind that comes off the coast kind of just makes our summers quite cooler than the rest of the state, which pushes our harvest back into kind of late fall. It's not uncommon to be picking grapes in November. So for those of you, your wine terms, we're talking hang time. We got some serious hang time in the Edna Valley. It's kind of November all the way, or I'm sorry, February all the way to November. And if you look at other regions that are, say, further north, you got Oregon, you can look at Burgundy, Champagne. Their winters last longer, so their bud break comes much later, and then they pack that growing season into a much shorter window. So I kind of compare it to grilling steak. I love cooking and smoking meats. So what we're doing in the Edna Valley is that slow and low kind of 24-hour brisket, while other regions may be doing that cook time much quicker. And that long, slow, and low for us gives us ability to get beautiful ripe fruit, but really preserve a ton of natural acidity, which we will see in the wines. I just talked about that. Gosh, I'm way ahead of myself. But yeah, we're talking about that early bud break, that long growing season. I love this kind of statistic about the Edna Valley. If you guys were to go on your weather app and be like, oh, July, the average temperature in the Edna Valley in San Luis Obispo, 79 degrees, it only lasts for about 2 hours, because we would wake up to fog every morning. And the warmest part of the day is after the fog burns off and before the coastal winds kick in. So that's only 1 to 2 hours right around lunchtime. So it's very misleading. Don't let those high temperatures fool you. We don't see that for too long. And we got this very cool, unique soil structure. This is where the continental plate and the Pacific plate collided about 17 million years ago, and just gave us this cool dynamic mix of kind of oceanic rock, marine deposits, and then you get some of those kind of clays and loams. There's not a flat spot on the property, and you really see that because the soils change dramatically every 100 yards or so. So we got a lot of diversity. So I'll quit talk about the Edna Valley, but to sum it up, we got one of the single coolest region in California, pretty much one of the longest growing seasons. We are just about the closest AVA to the ocean. We have that rare transverse valley that's just funneling in all that cool climate from the ocean and that great mix. What does that really mean? Well, it gives us ability to get ripe fruit. We don't have a shortage of ripeness here, but we preserve that natural acidity. That's that little extra pop in your mouth, that little extra zing to the wine. And that gives us, the ability to kind of pull out some beautiful flavors. And it's just heavenly conditions, I like to say, for Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, and all these racy whites. And real quick, before we start tasting, it's important to us, the vineyards are SIP certified sustainable. SIP stands for sustainable in practice. I love to show this grid because it kind of shows that this is a hardcore, very diverse program, especially when you're looking at compared to USDA organic or biodynamics, a lot of the same practices, but really when you get down into these dots, it has to do with kind of your air quality, your social responsibility, what you give back to the community, what you're doing with water conservation. So a lot of things that have been important to us, but I'm going to stop sharing the screen. And I am back, and now I could see all these comments. Awesome. Honeymooning and slow. I love it. That's the way to do it. I'm not sure if many have heard, and I'll probably butcher it, but way back when a gentleman wrote a book about the happiest places on this planet, and they named San Luis Obispo one of three. I think it was Stockholm, Singapore, and Slow. And then National Geographic ran an article on that in their magazine. And then it kind of went viral. Somehow Oprah found out about it and she came and checked out. But Slow is known as the happiest place in America. So I'm happy. I mean, I think that's what makes me happy to see that people come honeymoon here and check it out. So yeah, it is a great place. We like to call it the Wild West because we are not Napa or Sonoma, which has, a little more history, a much larger concentration in tourism. We're in the South Central Coast. We could kind of do whatever we want, which is a good segue into tasting these wines. So I am going to open up the Tangent Sauvignon Blanc, which, there we go. Yeah, this is a fun one. And so Tangent, as we get into the wines, Tangent is all about exploring these other white wines of the Edna Valley. It is a tangent from Chardonnay. We don't make red wines. We don't make Chardonnay. This is all about exploring varietals like Sauvignon Blanc, Alberino, and Pinot Gris. We talk about that long growing season. That gives us the ability to get these wines, which are just vibrant and lively, full of energy. And if you think about California Sauvignon Blanc, it's really weird if you think about it. I mean, don't quote me on this, but I'd say less than 1% of all California Sauvignon Blanc grown in California is probably cool climate Sauvignon Blanc. So meaning 99% of Sauvignon Blanc in California is grown in warm climates, which is a great wine, but stylistically, our cool climate's going to give us something different. But if you go look at the two top regions in the world for Sauvignon Blanc, in my opinion, would be the Loire Valley and Sancerre and Marlborough and the South Island in New Zealand. Those are both cool climate regions. So cool climate Sauvignon Blanc is right at home. So I'm not sure how many people have this open, but what makes this wine super unique to me is it kind of has those kind of New Zealand type aromatics on the nose. It kind of has that California mid palate weight. And then it kind of has that Sancerre kind of minerality, real lively finish on the palate. So it's kind of the best of both worlds, really three worlds in one. And the cool thing with this, this has a mix of vines from my grandfather's original planting. So you're talking 48-year-old Sauvignon Blanc vines grown 5 miles from the ocean. And then we've been exploring with some of these newer clones. And clones are variations of a varietal that have kind of been isolated and raised in nurseries from a mother vine, so on and so forth. Don't want to get too technical, but we have a clone that came over from the Loire Valley that we're working with. So, making this wine, it's quite interesting. It is the lowest price wine we make in the entire portfolio, but one of the most complicated wines we're making when it comes to winemaking. We're picking different parts of the vineyard at different time, morning side one day, waiting a couple more days to pick the afternoon side, bringing it to the winery, different yeasts, different cold soaks, a lot of different stuff. So ultimately it gives us this wine that just has a ton of that beautiful New Zealand, like I said, nose. And then you get that minerality as well. This has always been a favorite of mine.
John, you talk a little bit about how the temperature of the growing season impacts the flavors. Would you say that the proximity to the ocean, maybe that ocean breeze with the salt, would also affect that taste profile?
Yeah, it's funny you say that, Shannon, because as we go through these wines, every vintage I get salty characteristics in our wines, and that's in a very, very good way. I even get in the Pinot Noir, and there's been studies over in Spain, in Galicia, and the Rias Baixas, where they grow Alberino, which we will get to in our second wine. So I'm kind of jumping the gun there, but they've actually been able to measure some salt content on the skins of the grapes. So over there, they call it the Vino del Mar, the wine of the sea, and a classic descriptor of Alberino would be that kind of brininess. But I get them in a lot of our wines, which makes sense because that sea air, we get a lot of wind, we get a lot of big waves, so you kind of get some mist getting up into the wind, coming in, settling on the vines. It's just not going to land on the Alberino vine and make that have a briny character. It's going to land on all the grapes. So yes, the sea very much dictates everything that's been going on in the Edna Valley. Whether it's our soils, whether it's the climate, it is, it's kind of the mothership of what makes the Edna Valley tick. So I'd love to see some comments. What is the best temperature to serve Sauvignon Blanc? Drinking it too cold definitely masks a lot of flavors. I love drinking it at, what people would call cellar temperature, which is about 55 degrees, maybe a tad bit colder, but, I would definitely, put in your fridge and then crack it open and it will slowly get a little warmer, slowly sprout into show it. I think the cooler it is, the more closed the aromatics would be. So I think letting it, you definitely don't want your white wine warm, but you definitely don't need it super icy cold because it's not going to do the wine justice. So hopefully you guys are drinking this Sauvignon Blanc because this is one of my favorite. And it's, if you look at the label, this pretty much defines what we're doing with Tangent. It's kind of some old mid-century art with some watercolors, and it's kind of different explosions of what these wines are all about. And with Tangent, we really talk about it as a departure from the ordinary. This is a departure from, not saying that Chardonnay is ordinary, but, it's a departure from these kind of standard varietals and really kind of exploring what is out there in the Edna Valley, because we know cool climate makes great, great white wines. So I say we dig into some Albarino. So
John,
Albarino's,
jump on. We just have one question from David. Curious if the Sauvignon Blanc spends any time in oak.
yeah, so I should have mentioned that Tangent wines don't see any oak and they don't see any malolactic fermentation. And a little insight into malolactic fermentation, it's a secondary fermentation which takes malic acid, which is kind of that tart green apple, and turns it into lactic acid, which you think of kind of yogurt or dairy. We want to keep that malic acid, which kind of lifts it and brings that just brightness to the wines. So yes, and on top of that, we're seeing no oak. Really what you're tasting with all these Tangent wines is what Mother Nature's given us. You really, from a winemaking standpoint, it's not like Chardonnay where the winemaker could really develop flavors with winemaking practices. This is Mother Nature in her unadulterated form, as we like to say, fresh, pure, clean. That pretty much sums up Tangent. Well, very good. So let's do a quick little trivia question here. So I mentioned the sand dunes off of the coast here. What movie was filmed there? And you got to name the number too. You just can't name the version of it. So I see some right answers there. So Shannon, you're gonna have to figure out who gets that one. Wow, I feel like a game show host. That's pretty fun. Giving away stuff and asking questions. Well, this is our next wine, Tangent Albarino, which trying to get rid of the funkiness, but this is a fun wine. So I'd love to see in the chat how many people have had Albarinos, maybe some of their favorite Albarinos, and if they've ever been over to Galicia, which is in the northwest tip of Spain where Albarinos typically grown. So people associate Spain with the Mediterranean and that great lifestyle. Where they're growing Albarino in Spain, it is not the Mediterranean. They're growing it right above Portugal. They grow it in Portugal as well. It's known as Albarino with a V. But in Spain, they call it Albarino and the Rias Baixas. And they sit right smack on the Atlantic Ocean. And that Atlantic Ocean is pounding their coastline with a lot of fog, wind, a lot more rain than we get. But if you take a step back, it's very similar to the Edna Valley. Or let me back up. That's the mothership. The Edna Valley is very similar to the Rias Baixas. We just don't get as much rain, but we get that fog and that wind in our version of the Pacific Ocean versus the Atlantic. And it's, I've been fortunate to, when we first planted Albarino, we went over there for 2 weeks and immersed ourselves in the grape and really spent a lot of quality time with the top winemakers in the region. But we learned that Edna Valley is spot on. And, so much that our family went ahead and planted 45 acres to Albarino, which is a pretty big investment and one of the largest plantings outside of Spain and Portugal. And that investment really kind of helped elevate Albarino as a domestic producer. We were not the pioneers, though. Gentlemen like Brian Babcock, Michael Havens, Alan Kinney, they brought Albarino to Spain, from Spain to here. But we like to think we kind of took it to the next level. And with Tangent, have been really out there kind of just showing what domestic Albarino could be all about. I'm going to take a little quick drink of water. So talking about the wine, Albarino, we talked about it earlier. Saline brininess is a classic descriptor. It's one of the highest acid white grapes out there. It's one of the last we're picking because we have to let it hang to get that acid down. But that acidity just makes this so bright and lively. It's, it's a fun wine to drink, explore. In the Edna Valley, I'm proud to say, I would argue with anyone, the Edna Valley is the new world home of Albarino. I've counted in our little area, our little valley that you heard me talk about earlier, over 25 Albarino bottlings from various producers. So those are producers that are buying grapes or have vineyards. And for that concentration of bottlings in such a small area, right on the coast, I think, and they're all great. They're all fantastic wines. I encourage anyone, if you see an Edna Valley Albarino, no matter who the producer, you probably will not be disappointed. But it showcases what this varietal could be done in this cool climate of California. And a fun story from our trip when we went over to Spain and met all these fantastic winemakers, one of the top winemakers in the country encouraged us to submit our Albarino to the Bacchus International Wine Competition in Madrid, Spain, kind of their Super Bowl of wine competitions. And there was 230 Albarinos submitted between Portugal and Spain, and one from the New World. And if you can imagine, it was Tangent Albarino. And guess what? They gave out 3 gold medals, and Tangent was one of them. So to go over to Spain and, hold our own with, the mothership, so to speak, is a great kind of, validation of what we are doing here. So I'm going to take a little snip and smell. I see a question about it being out of stock. Chad, I think we just heard it sold out just recently.
Looks like Chad might be checking stock right now.
Yep, the Albarino was part of our Power Buy program, and unfortunately it sold out extremely fast, which really tells how good the wine is. It is coming back. I did talk to the broker earlier, so we are getting more in stock.
Awesome. I see a question about why Albarino. So we actually had a vineyard that we took a long-term lease on back in the early 2000s. It had 5 acres of Albarino planted by a gentleman by the name of Alan Kinney. And we made a little bit of wine from that first vintage of Tangent in 2005. We just loved it. At the same time, we were pulling out older vines of our vineyard, and it was just kind of perfect timing for the ability to come back and plant some of these new varietals. And man, I'm glad we did, because like I said, I think these Albarinos are just dynamite. When I say these, I mean Albarinos from the region, and of course Tangent. We like to think we're carrying the flag, but it makes sense. Where cool climate Chardonnay grows well, where cool climate Sauvignon Blanc grows well. of course, these other whites are going to grow well. And you look at Alberino and the climate that it lives in kind of that Galicia Rías Baixas region, it really makes sense. And like I said, I'm stoked we did it. We've been, our first vintage was 2005. So we just finished up our 15th vintage, and they just get better and better. So that is Alberino. I'm trying to think if I miss anything there from a flavor standpoint. Actually, here's a fun little tidbit. In Galicia, apparently they have the highest consumption of seafood outside of Japan. If you can imagine, Alberino is made for seafood pairing. It's been grown there for centuries, and I think it's just kind of mutated into being just about the perfect wine for seafood. And if you've ever been over there, they have all this unique shellfish. They got flat shell oysters. They got the razor clams. They have the barnacles that they harvest off the rocks. They got the baby scallops. They got the octopus, the pulpo, as they call it. And this wine is just perfect with those wines. So this is a great seafood wine. Quite honestly, it's a great pairing wine altogether. I mean, it's going to go with all sorts of dishes. That acidity is just going to do wonders to various cuisines. So that is the Alberino. So to round out the tangent experience,
John, before you move forward, I'm going to share the trivia winner.
okay,
We're at the edge of their seats. So the question that you had asked was what movie had been filmed on those sand dunes right there on the coast in the Edna Valley, and that was Pirates of the Caribbean #3. And so congratulations to Mary Watts on our Zoom chat here. She is the winner of one of the $100 gift cards.
All right, Mary, job well done. Well, hopefully some of that will get you some more Tangent Alberino, or Pinot Gris, we'll call it. So last wine of the lineup for Tangent is the Tangent Pinot Gris, which is, the wine we make the least amount of. It's just a fun wine we're doing on the side to, it's really a huge part of the Tangent message. We called it Pinot Gris way back when in 2005. It just seemed more fitting. Oregon Pinot Gris was booming, so on and so forth. But stylistically, this is not in, say, that Alsatian Pinot Gris style. This is more in that, what I call that Northern Italian Pinot Grigio style, like you would get out of Friuli or Alto Adige, of course, with the California twist. But it goes back to my constant talking about cool climate. A lot of Pinot Gris in California is grown in warmer climate. Naturally, it is a pretty neutral grape, meaning it's not going to have this explosive aromatics. When grown in warmer climate, I think you kind of get these riper flavors. But what I love about our Pinot Gris is it just has this beautiful vibrancy, and there's a ton of minerality, and just the aromatics jump. And I think we're able to get that because of that long, cool growing season. Yeah, this is a fun one. I do not have this wine as often as I should. And every time I do, I'm just like, man, I got to remember to pick up more bottles of that. We talk about that bright acidity. This wine has so much kind of that citrus spice. I mean, there's just a pop out of the mouth. It's drinking really good. I encourage you guys to check it out if you get a chance. But that is kind of the Tangent lineup. So we tasted Sauvignon Blanc, which is a rare expression of California cool climate Sauvignon Blanc. We tasted the Alberino, which is, coming from the Edna Valley, which is this new world hub of Alberino. And then we just tasted this Pinot Gris. All three wines, going back to what I said, they don't see any oak, no malolactic fermentation. What you are tasting is really what Mother Nature's given us. These are just pure wines that showcase how great these white wines do in the Edna Valley. So that was a good session of alternative white wines. How'd everybody is it? I'd love to see some comments in here. If anyone has any of those open, if what their favorites were, or you could keep that to yourself, but I always love getting feedback. Okay, well, this is another interesting side-by-side. So now we have two Chardonnays. So the first one is this beautiful Chardonnay, Bailana Fire Peak Chardonnay. Bailana was started by my grandmother. So if you go back to the history we talked about and everything my grandfather did, they built a house about 4 miles away from the vineyard, and it had 3.5 acres in her front yard. And my grandmother was a dynamic woman. She basically said, okay, Jack, you're doing your thing. I'm going to show you how to make Chardonnay. And she planted these 3.5 acres in her front yard. She came from Kentucky. Her dad raised thoroughbred horses. She was kind of raised in that kind of Southern lifestyle. She was known to throw, amazing parties. One of her dear friends was Julia Childs. They would throw some great parties together, but she really wanted to show the world that she can make Chardonnay. And this is all the way back in the 80s. And that basically started Bailiana, which, if you've ever been out to California, and I'm sure they're back there, but the yellow blooming acacia trees are the Bailiana acacias. So that is where the name comes from. But this is kind of the original wine that really my family made 100% on our own. And it goes back to Catherine Niven. She had a couple strokes. She spent much of her later years in bed, but that didn't keep her from picking up the phone, and she would call her favorite restaurants in Honolulu, LA, and San Francisco, because those are the only 3 cities they ever went to, and say, you got to carry my wine. And that's basically what started all this. And then, it turned out she never paid her alcohol taxes or got the labels registered with the TTB, and the feds were about ready to kick in her door. Not really, but you know what I mean? And so the family stepped in and said, okay, let's make this Bailiana, something a little more legitimate and bigger and grander. And is myself and my cousin Michael is kind of when we came back to the family in the late 90s, and we were given Bailiana as an opportunity to see what we could do and where we could take it. So Bailiana, the focus is real simple. We make Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. Those are 2 of the backbone varietals of the Edna Valley. Half of the AVA is planted to Chardonnay. And going back to that 1%, but 1% of all of California Chardonnay is what would come from the Edna Valley. So it's still a very unique mix. But what makes Edna Valley Chardonnay so unique, and if you think about Edna Valley vineyards and all these other great wineries in the region, Edna Valley Chardonnay, our experience really blossomed in the late 80s into the 90s. It became really more of a well-known varietal for the region, still very small, but a lot of people started discovering it. And it's because of this style. We have the ability to get this ripe fruit, which gives you this beautiful tropical boom, but then there's that citrus and acidity. So it's great. So with the Fire Peak, we got the Fire Peak here, and then the True Myth. Try not to get we'll get to the True Myth, but they're 2 different styles, same winemaker, same varietal, different parts of the vineyard, but 2 different styles. And mentioning the winemaker, our winemaker is Rob Takigawa. Rob and I have been working together really since the late 90s. He's been had his hands in these wines for a long, long time. So it's interesting to see what he could do with Chardonnay. But Fire Peak's unique. Remember we were talking about the malolactic fermentation, the conversion of that malic acid to lactic acid. Majority of a lot of Chardonnays go through that malolactic conversion, and that's where you kind of get those creamier, buttery Chardonnays. But with Fire Peak, we still keep that 0 ml. And so we're keeping all that malic acid in there, which Edna Valley naturally, I think, has given us a little, manageable malic acids, but we love it in that Fire Peak because it lifts it. This wine is very elegant. It's very balanced, but then it just has this brightness. It kind of finishes it off. Yeah, I mean, Edna Valley Chardonnay is super unique. I love, especially when you get to see, say, European wine writers write about the region. They kind of say, this is what California should be like, a small AVA that has a varietal that they specialize in, and it's a showcase of that place, that single place. So stylistically, this is not your typical California Chardonnay.
John, now what type of wine glass are you drinking from? Anything specific?
I was just going through my cabinet, and this one's kind of shaped a little different. It's kind of in between a Bordeaux shape and a Burgundy shape. And I have no idea where I got it, but I was kind of, because we're going to taste some Cabernet later, and we have some Sauvignon Blanc, and I was kind of like, okay, let's kind of morph in between. But Yeah, I mean, wine glasses are unique, and they do make a big difference. I've sat through a handful of the famous Riedel seminars where you get to taste through all the different shapes, and man, it's amazing how different it is. There's a whole science and how it delivers it to your palate and what part of the palate, so on and so forth. But I kind of went with this hybrid. I'm not sure what it's called, but it's one of my favorites to taste out of. So the Fire Peak Chardonnay is kind of our house style that's been around since the 90s. This wine has not changed. This has always been kind of against the grain because it doesn't go through ML, but it really has this lifted, beautiful elegance to it. And it has that energy, that vibrancy that we're always shooting for. And when we get to the second Chardonnay, which is True Myth Chardonnay, and you see on the label there, the myth here is Mother Nature, and there she is on the label. You can see she's surrounded by butterflies. Really the true myth is Mother Nature. Being farmers, you live and die by Mother Nature. She really, predicts what's going on and kind of flexes her muscles every now and then. But the myth is true. That is Mother Nature. That's what it's all about. But True Myth is all about slow counties. So we make an Edna Valley Chardonnay and then a Paso Robles Cabernet, which we'll get to next. But stylistically, this is very, very different from the Fire Peak Blanc Chardonnay. This is more that California style. While Fire Peak maybe had more citrus tones, we bring in much, much riper, juicier tropical tones to this. There's more oak on this wine. It's very full. It's got a nice, beautiful long finish. It drinks very Californian style, but once again, you can't hide that Edna Valley acidity. So there's just this brightness at the end of it that kind of makes it stand out in kind of that California style crowd. Yeah, it's bigger, it's juicier. Like I said, it's more tropical driven. It's fun to taste these side by side because once again, the same winemaker, same vineyard, granted different parts of the vineyard, but really, they kind of call Chardonnay the chameleon of wine grapes, meaning that it could take on so many different looks, shapes, and sizes. And that's really typically at the hand of the winemaker. Winemaker could introduce oak barrels. Those could be neutral oak or newer oak. We talked about the malolactic fermentation. There's ripeness, there's lees stirring. There's so much it could do to kind of change Chardonnay at the winery as opposed to, say, like our Tangent Sauvignon Blanc. What we're bringing in, that wine's made when we're picking it. You're just kind of taking it through the process of fermentation. So this is kind of, Rob's kind of version of that bigger, juicier style. Let's do a little trivia. Gosh, that's another wine I don't have that often. And every time I have it, I'm much more of a big racy acid driven white wine drinker. And this is that big juicy California Chard. It's like a guilty pleasure. It's like turning on an old, Seinfeld episode or something. It's good stuff. But let's do some trivia. So I mentioned my grandfather planted 13 varietals out of the gate, but we're only growing 3 of those varietals today. What are those 3 varietals?
All right. Well, everyone starts throwing in their answers. I do have another question from someone on our Zoom chat. Shannon Brooks is, curious about the elevation throughout the vineyard. In that valley.
So if you look at the photo behind me, we are really kind of rolling hills, and elevation wise, I think we're at 150 feet because, we're right smack at the ocean. So we don't have a ton of massive hills, but we do have a lot of steep rolling hills. There's different parts of the vineyard that could get fairly steep. Our favorite block that we call the Tenderloin of Pinot Noir is probably the steepest part of the vineyard. So it's just kind of, we're not growing mountain style of varietals here. This is nice rolling gentle slopes. So that is the True Myth Chard. So you could see we just powered through 4 white wines. If you were at the tasting room, we could probably taste 20 white wines because we have a whole plethora of them. But that the region is great for white wine. We talk about that vibrant acidity, our ability to get ripe fruit, all that good stuff. So it's, it's a dynamic region for all these different wines. But I think you guys also have the Pinot Noir in some of your stores. We don't have the Pinot Noir tonight, but that's another one to go explore and see what kind of this cool climate Pinot Noir is all about. But now we're going to move about 30 miles to our north to Paso Robles and our True Myth Cab. And I'm going to kind of break this up and share my screen and show you guys a little bit of Paso. Let's see here. So here's a little map of California showing you Paso Robles. This is pretty much smack exactly halfway in between LA and San Francisco. The Edna Valley, we're probably just a little bit closer to Los Angeles, but we're about 30 miles south of Paso Robles. So here's some interesting stats. Paso Robles as an AV8 is a huge, big place. And that's great because it brings a ton of diversity. You look at it, 35 by 25 miles, and the far western edge of the AVA is about 6 miles from the ocean. We had that question about an elevation. Here you're going to see all sorts of elevations, and you're going to see a lot of steep, beautiful vineyards on the west side. And as you head east, it starts to flatten out, even though there's plenty of rolling hills and even steeper hillsides. There's a ton of different soils there. Look at that total acres. That's 614,000 of the region, but about 40,000 of that is planted. And you can see where Cabernet comes in. I think I can't see it, but it should say about 16,000 acres. They're growing about 40 varietals across the whole region. And there's now over 200 wineries. I think you rewind 10, 20 years ago, it would be fractions of that. So here's kind of a map. A few years ago, they broke the Paso Robles AVA into 11 sub-districts, and each of these sub-districts exists for a reason because each one is different, whether it's going to be their temperature swings, their soil profile. Like I said, Paso is this kind of land of diversity, but a lot of people talk about Paso between east side and west side, and this is US 101 highway. This would be stuff on the west, this would be stuff on the east, but man, it's a dynamic place to really grow a lot of wines, in particular red wines. So what are the major influences that make Paso so unique? It's these 5 things, but this one right here to me is really what makes Paso very, very different from a lot of these other warmer regions. It has one of the largest diurnal shifts in all of California, and it's got to be for a growing region in a lot of the world. So that diurnal shift is what's your daytime high and what's your daytime low. And during the summer, it could get up to 50 degrees. So imagine 100 degrees, during the heat of the day, but then once again, closer to the ocean, they have more of a mountain range there that kind of, keeps that heat there longer, but at night that fog and that cool ocean effect is going to come in and it could drop a full 50 degrees. So that is a big shift, but that gives ability to get these juicy, opulent red fruit, but also preserve some of that beautiful acidity that you want, in your red wines. Topography I talked about, it's this land of diversity. You got everything from river bottoms to rolling hills. You got mountains, you got flats. The whole thing is there. It's really defined by a number of different aspects, and you get a ton of different soils. We're talking about soils. Paso has a lot of the calcareous soils, which is ideal for Cabernet. They also have the weathered granite. They got sedimentary marine sandstone. There's over 45 soil series, so there's a lot going on. With True Myth, we're expanding out besides these 3 soils that we're typically sourcing from, and we continue to kind of explore all these different districts because there's so much going on. And I think that's just a quick little Paso look, and I am back. Sorry, I'm just trying to read questions. I probably shouldn't be that, but it's always tempting. So let's dig into the Paso Cab. So, if you think of Paso Robles, lots going on. I mean, you go back to the roots of the late 1800s. You got old vine vineyards still around. When I say old vine, typically old vine Zinfandel. So Zinfandel's been in the region for a long, long time as kind of the backbone. Paso Cab really was planted in the late 60s and has really been kind of the secret workhorse of Paso. And when I say secret, I mean, it really is no secret, but there just wasn't as many producers way back when making cab. And there's been some of the old school great wineries still, they've been carrying the torch, and they've been doing an amazing job for so many years and really putting Paso Cab on the map. And then you got new guys. There's just so much going on with Paso Cab. You've always had the Paso Rhone movement, great Rhone varietals grown, a lot of great blends, but Paso Cab has always just been there, really representing the region. And when I think of Paso Cab, I think of, like I said earlier, this opulence, this juicy fruit. We talk about that diurnal shift that helps preserve that natural acidity. Heat typically metabolizes acid. So yeah, if you're just sitting there at 80 to 90 degrees, 20 hours of the day, you're going to lose acids. And that's why a lot of regions in the world can't grow great grapes. But by getting that low temp and kind of giving those vines and the grapes a chance to kind of relax and chill, preserves that natural acidity. You pair that with that opulent fruit, and man, that's a great fixin' for Cabernet. And a cool thing that I truly believe, I mean, Paso has become a great alternative to, say, Napa and Sonoma, where prices have kind of jumped up, supply and demand, and a lot of good stuff going on in Napa and Sonoma, but there's not too many wines from there that kind of could be your everyday drinker. And with this True Myth Cab, you're talking about $20. This is a lot of wine for $20. And I'll share this with the group, but we kind of weave in what I call our secret sauce in this wine, and that is about 10 to 15% of Syrah, but Syrah from the Edna Valley, grown right over my back here. And that Syrah is a totally different beast. If I'd love to hear in the chat if anyone's had Syrah from the Edna Valley, it is an amazing wine. It is like white pepper with blueberry, with a ton of structure and spice. And by blending that back into our Paso Cab, it kind of gives a nice lifted, spicy edge to the wine, and kind of balances out some of that juicy fruit and kind of makes what I call the True Myth style. So I'm going to give this a taste here. Yeah, on the nose, this just has that beautiful cab, kind of that black cherry, that currant. There's some tobacco. There's some beautiful kind of sweet vanilla lactones that come from the oak. This wine has always been, a favorite. I love, I could be wrong, and someone may go on and prove me wrong, but the app Vivino, if anyone uses the app Vivino, which is kind of, I call it Facebook for wine drinkers, where you can make comments and follow your wines. Every Thursday, they release their top 20 wines under $20. And True Myth Cab has been on that list probably 70% of the time for the past 3 or 4 years. And those are the consumers speaking. So, it also gets great press. We got a ton of 90 plus scores, but I love to see the consumers kind of put that at their list. And that's kind of organic. That's how when you let the consumer speak, it means a lot. Yeah, that is a fabulous Cabernet. And, the crazy thing is, this wine's been around since 2012. So you could imagine we've been making wine for a long time. And in this short window, it's becoming the number one seller of the portfolio, of the Baylana portfolio, which is Tangent, True Myth, Baylana, and then we also have another wine called Zocker. So it's, it's amazing how Cabernet reigns supreme. And in a few short years, it's come to number one. And I should point out, and a big part of the history is, earlier this year, my family sold this collection of wines to WX Brands, and under their stewardship, I'm fortunate to continue to work with them, but it's going to be just, fantastic and exciting to see where they could take these wines. And it's great because they retained all the key people that are behind these wines, like our winemaker, Rob Takigawa, the whole team at the tasting room. There's a lot of good stuff. So I'm excited to see where we go from there. But yeah, that's a quick run through. We just hit Paso. We hit the Edna Valley. That is San Luis Obispo County. That is, our little sliver of California. This is a place that's so different from the North Coast. Not many places in the Edna Valley where you could be sitting on a white sand beach surfing and within 10 minutes be tasting out of one of our barrels at the winery. It's a dynamic place to live. It's a dynamic place to grow grapes and make wine. I'm just lucky to call it home. So yeah, that is kind of this visit to the South Central Coast. Hopefully everybody enjoyed that.
John, you want to revisit the second trivia question?
Sure. Do you have a winner?
I have not selected a winner yet. I was hoping you could help me out on that one.
Oh, sure. I see. You want me to say who was right, and you do your magic from there?
Sure, yeah, definitely I'm gonna hand that
Okay.
that right over to you. But while you're taking a look at that, I'm going to just talk a little bit about our 90 Days Around the World promotion, which is what everyone is joining us doing now. We are, welcoming brands and experts like John to join us virtually and, talk about what they do and their brand, their spirits, their wines. So it's been a really great time for me. And I know that our audience has enjoyed it as well. So if you are interested in winning a $2,500 gift card to the New Hampshire Liquor and Wine Outlets, as well as some one-on-one guidance from our team of experts, so that you can pick all of the right products to stock your at-home bar, you're going to want to download the Scavify app. That's Scavify. And that can be found in your app store, whether it's on an Android or an Apple device. And so essentially every event that you join us virtually, you're going to earn points. And the more points you earn, the better your chances are of winning the $2,500 gift card. So there are quite a few other large gift card winnings as well. So you definitely want to take advantage of that. Again, the app that you're going to want to download is Scavify, Scavify. Every event is going to have a different code word that you're going to enter on that Scavify app. And I'm sure quite a few of you are waiting for that. Tonight's code word is Edna Valley. Again, tonight's code word is Edna Valley. So the more points you earn, the bigger the prizes that you'll be entered to win. So definitely take advantage of that.
So the correct answer, do you want me to pick the winner or just give you the answer?
Whatever you'd like.
Well, the correct answer was Sauvignon Blanc, Chardonnay, and Pinot Noir. And a lot of people got it right. But I remember when I asked that question, Catherine Bash, I don't know if that's your full name because it goes ... after that.
Catherine Bashaw?
Yeah, she answered that in like 3 seconds, which was pretty impressive. So I think we got to give her the prize right there. But we still have a third trivia question.
We do.
Let me think. What would be a good one? We should ask something about Paso. So we were talking about the diurnal shift, and what was my example of what that shift between high and low. So simple math, high minus low equals X. So what is that number? Look at that.
The answer's coming in.
Yep. And they're all right. So I'll let you pick that one because that's tough.
And the answer was 50 degrees.
Yes.
All right. So just based off of a random selection, looks like Jim Townsend.
There you go.
Answered it correctly. So Jim and Catherine, if you want to just message me your email addresses, I will reach out to you and get your mailing addresses so we can get you those gift cards.
Yeah. And please, if anyone has any questions, give us a shout on the messages here. But it was my pleasure to spend some time with you today. Hopefully I opened your eyes into the Edna Valley and Paso Robles. Like I said, it's a dynamic region. We got so much going on here, and so blessed to work here. And there's so many great people in our industry. It's one big happy family. And it's great to kind of be doing what we're doing in this greater world of wine, but bringing it back and really showcasing wines of a place, which are these two great regions. So,
hey, John.
Yep.
There is one more question in the Q&A section.
Yep.
Is asking if the fires to the north impacted the grapes, and what might the heat from the fires do to grapes in relation to the wine they produce?
Well, fortunately, it did not really impact us too dramatically, and which luckily I didn't have to become an expert in, fire damage. But yeah, I mean, it's super unfortunate of what happened throughout the state with the fires. I mean, it's just tragic, and it did do a lot of damage. You had fires all over, and what we got affected were primarily from the fires in Monterey and Big Sur, and we saw a lot of smoke, more smoke than I've ever seen in a lifetime. But really, from what I've learned, is with smoke taint, which eventually makes the grapes unusable, it really needs to be fresh smoke. So you need to be, pretty darn close to where that fire's originated. If the smoke has traveled a pretty far distance, which in our case was, well over 100 miles, you're not going to see it as much. There was some smoke taint in the region, both in Paso Robles and down in our neck of the woods. It typically shows up more in red wines than white wines because it gets eventually into the wine through the skins and the maceration, which, with red wines, it's fermented on the skin. So it's spending time, as opposed to white wines, you're just pressing off the skins. But yeah, we are fortunate to dodge some major bullets, but unfortunately there was a lot of wineries that were not, and, our hearts go out to them, and it's super sad. But yeah, this has kind of been a new dynamic for California that we weren't quite used to, and a lot of people are learning a lot of stuff. And really, for damage to the vineyard, I think you really truly have to be in the kind of the line of sight for that fire. I mean, I've read things where people say, in fact, vineyards help slow down a lot of these fires because they're natural fire breaks. I mean, a vineyard really shouldn't burn as much because of all the green tissue, so on and so forth. But it's more the vines that are on the outer line area that would see that fire. But yeah, super sad. Let's just hope 2021 is a much more forgiving year for all of us.
Well, John, thank you so much for joining us tonight. This has been so awesome. I've already seen so many comments saying how thankful they are for you joining us tonight and how informative this has all been. So thank you so much. Chad, thank you again for joining us, keeping everyone updated on the availability. So Chad has taken down a few email addresses for when that Alberino gets back in stock. And for those of you that are still watching, if you enjoyed tonight's event, please be sure to pre-register on our 90daysaroundtheworld.com website so that you can be entered to win exclusive prizes like the 3 $100 gift cards that we raffled off tonight. You're also going to rack up some additional points in your 90 days passport. So again, that code word for tonight is Edna Valley. We have a handful of really great events for you in the coming weeks, so be sure you check out that 90daysaroundtheworld.com site to figure out which events you'd most like to attend. So if you have any further questions for John, please don't hesitate to reach out on Facebook, and we'll do our best to get them answered for you. Again, thank you so much, John. It's been a pleasure to have you, and hope everyone has a great night.
Yep. And if you come out to SLO, let us know and come by and see us. It's a fabulous place to visit. And the taste room has beautiful patios to just sit back, overlook the vineyards, and drink all these wines and a whole lot more. So thanks for inviting me. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, John. Have a great night, everyone.
All righty.